Well, welcome everybody. I think we're going to get started. It's 1:30 sharp, and some of our panelists have very busy schedules, so we're going to start right on time. Thanks for attending an evolved state of enterprise imaging presentation and fireside chat. I'm Florent Saint-Clair. I'm the moderator for this discussion. I want to introduce our panel. Starting from the right, we have Scott Coberly, who's the head of Enterprise Imaging Informatics at University of California, San Diego Health. We have Chris Hafey, who's Chief Architect at AWS. We have Dr. Shez Partovi, who is the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer at Philips. Thank you for being with us. We have Dr. Jared Saul, who is the Chief Medical Officer at AWS, and Dmitriy Tochilnik, who's the founder and CTO of Dicom Systems, which is the company that I serve as Chief Operating Officer. So gentlemen, thank you all for being here. So to contextualize the conversation, we're talking about enterprise imaging, which is a subject that's been rehashed so many times, yet, at least I personally feel, it's never been really established what anybody means by enterprise imaging, right? There's as many definitions of enterprise imaging as there are people working in it. And so as part of this discussion, I'd like to suggest some direction for it, and I would love to get your individual perspectives on what it should mean, right, for our customers. We have a unique opportunity to have the perspective of a health system and a large cloud vendor, a large IT vendor, and a very small but very important interoperability vendor, right? We serve, there's only 33 of us on our team, but we have a global install base, right? So these various perspectives on enterprise imaging are going to give us an idea of what enterprise imaging should be. So the most important aspect of this conversation is that we really shouldn't be looking at enterprise imaging as radiology-centric anymore, because there are so many other specialties, subspecialties that rely on imaging, yet have difficulty accessing imaging, right? So part of this conversation is going to be, how are we going to make the enterprise imaging environment more inclusive of these other subspecialties? Because historically, radiology has been the most prevalent adopter of new technologies, even before meaningful use, right? Radiology was digital long before EHRs became really, really big because of government subsidies. And so radiology has kind of a responsibility to help the rest of the enterprise, and Scott is going to attest to that for UCSD. Wanted to share this visual with you as a real-world example of the problem we're talking about today. This visual is an actual health system on the East Coast, and every little blue box in there is a different vendor in the imaging space for that hospital. This is one hospital. They have in excess of 50 or so different imaging vendors that are all expected to be stitched together and work together to serve the patient base. So what I'd like to do is start with Scott and ask you, because you're an end user, right? You represent a constituency in a large health system, and you've actually done enterprise imaging, right? You didn't wait for the hospital leadership to come to you and say, please do enterprise imaging. You decided, your team, the person you report to, Amy Radnich, has a huge leadership role at UCSD, and she basically let you run amok, right?
Yes.
So please tell us a little bit about how that worked out for UCSD.
Yeah, I benefited greatly from having, from the very get-go, a wonderful partner in my boss, Amy Radnich, who really saw that initially we were only responsible for the Radiology PACS system, the Radiology Reporting System, and the Radiology Information System. And there were a lot of other applications that were clinical delivery applications that were kind of just being managed by individual departments, similar to how we were in radiology. But they did not have the technical experience to do that efficiently. And so our IT partners at the time did not want to engage with these clinical departments to take over their workload due to a lack of resources. And so we decided that we would offer our expertise in imaging and provide that service to the other ologies in the hospital as they came up. And it grew very organically over a decade, from starting with supplemental radiology tools and then starting to reach out to these other departments, ophthalmology, pathology, name them. Orthopedics, surgery, all of them have some imaging component. And we took on that workload. And then as we became educated in all of those ologies on our team, we then were able to figure out and untangle what they needed from the front end, as far as orderables, all the way through till getting those bills dropped at the door and having the results for the patients be dropped into the Epic environment. And so we were able to learn on the way because our leadership did not know that we were doing this per se. We didn't have any pressure put on us to execute on something very quickly, and so we could learn, identify those gaps, identify what technologies were needed to fill those gaps, and provide a complete solution to the other ologies in the hospital that radiology had kind of at the outset of the PACS in the late 90s. And so we were able to really provide not the same, because other areas in the hospital do not want to follow a radiology workflow. And so we were able to come up with efficient, effective workflows that gave them what they needed, and integrated all of that imaging data into a centralized location that was linked directly to the EMR to facilitate more efficient clinical care, visibility to all the physicians that would be engaged in caring for a particular patient, and then making sure that the financial component was also taken care of on the back end so billing could be acquired, since this is a business as well. So it's been a fun project.
So in other words, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe,
we may have renamed ourselves without anybody knowing a couple of times along the way. And
that's actually brilliant. So you're 10 years, you said 10 years you've been doing this?
13.
13. So this is great because, I can tell you, congrats, you've been 13 years ahead, because yesterday I was meeting with a customer of ours who said basically, head of radiology said, I want to add more value. I'm quote, I mean, literally, we were sitting with some of the team members here, literally in the room, said, as a radiologist, I want to add more value. Shez, is there a way we can create an archive in the back end that has imaging beyond radiology, that has pathology, that has other ologies, and then we can use a zero-footprint viewer from you, integrate with Epic, and deliver that back out? So, hats off to you, because you're 13 years ahead, but you're pointing out an entrepreneurial opportunity for radiologists in the enterprise imaging space, to your point of what it is. We haven't really talked about that yet. But that is, in fact, I think, and we are, you, I mean, I'm ex-radiologist, so if I say we, it's because I'm sometimes changing hats. But radiology are the experts, radiology departments, teams are the experts in large payload management.
Yep.
They've been doing it for we've been doing it for a long time.
Yep.
We've also, Philips have been doing it all long time, but so that's in fact, I think that will be an opportunity for imagers to actually bring additional value, and we can talk to these two gentlemen about other ways of doing that with cloud as well. Mm-hmm. But that's actually a signal that we're getting at Philips from customers that say, I want to slap a vendor-neutral archive in. I want to use that and bring all the stuff together, put your zero-footprint viewer in, integrated with mostly Epic. And I want to be in radiology, the one that delivers this to the enterprise to increase my value in the organization as not just interpretation, but a steward of that imaging. So hats off to you, 13 years ahead of everyone else. I just got this call yesterday.
I have to take one piece of exception with what you said, Shez. There is no such thing as an ex-radiologist.
Okay, I was going to say, what are you going to disagree with?
But seriously, I think it's a good point, and I think radiology has always been the tip of the technology spear for the health systems, and this is a real opportunity for us in radiology to, I think, push that notion to the next level. So it's interesting to see it happening. I know it's not easy, but I think the technology is there, and I think the need is real.
Yeah, and I would only leave with, it's difficult, obviously, in hospitals. Radiology typically had their own PACS teams. When all of a sudden you have the largest data sets and the largest storage arrays and sprawling server requirements in a IT-supported VM infrastructure and networking and the tax that this particular technology requires on an infrastructure, all of a sudden the IT group starts to see you as a kind of a hidden
problem.
IT group. Yeah,
Problem. Just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, we became a problem, and so they acquired us into their umbrella after 10 years of kind of trying to figure this out. And it would be great if IT did not fear that knowledge, but rather embraced it and incorporated it. And it doesn't matter who reports to who in the end, but ultimately when you have someone that's focused and dedicated on the end user experience, like a PACS team would be, different from some IT infrastructure groups. You really need to have an amazing team.
I'm blowing your list, but can I add something?
Please, absolutely.
And then Chris can jump in, because you just read the second part of the conversation from yesterday. This is just uncanny. And the conversation was, and our IT has said that they don't want to manage it. Mm-hmm. So, which is easy for us because our VNA is in the cloud. These two gentlemen can step in. But that's the other shift that we're seeing, where IT departments are saying, for large payloads, security, compliance, privacy, is there a way you could just take care of this for us, Philips? And so I wonder if there probably are still organizations that's like this, but we're also seeing signals where there's a realization that the tsunami has started, this is impossible to manage, and it's going to become a multi-ology. And once pathology comes on board, those image sizes are going to become voluminous and unmanageable. And some IT departments are saying, yes, I get what you want to do, but just don't put it on my infrastructure. And so we're doing a lot of that in the cloud now, almost exclusively, actually. Our VNA is in the cloud. So
I'd like to point out a challenge that you didn't have. Well, you had it for 10 years, but it kind of waned away. That example, which is that health system on the East Coast, sorry you guys can't see it, but there are actually 9 different departments in charge of all of those 50 or so imaging vendors, right? That fragmentation is perpetuated. And the CIO in a hospital organization, because of the perception of the cost of their Epic or Cerner or whatever it is they have as their EHR, if they spent $1 billion on that EHR, relatively speaking, the imaging side is going to be the red-haired stepchild, right? You have to organize yourselves because you can't count on a very busy, very expensive EHR side of the house who often doesn't understand imaging like you do, to be in charge of imaging, right? So it's our contention that over time, the EHR needs its equal partner, the IHR, the imaging health record. And that's where I really want to hear about Philips's innovation and ideas. So you're a radiologist, you've been in a very large health system, you've been with a large cloud vendor. What is Philips intending to, or what is your vision for improving clinical collaboration surrounding medical imaging?
Sure.
specifically?
I'll do two quick lenses, and since I've spoken too much already, I want to let my colleagues here speak. But just to finish the thought on this idea that you said something really important, which is there are really essentially two major applications in a health environment, EMR and the PACS system. ERP is the third, but that's really not a clinical operational thing. So whatever you surface has to either come up through the PACS or through the EMR. And so when we think of how we improve collaboration and improve delivery of images to constituents like referring physicians, our point of view is that it has to integrate into the EMR. So for example, our zero footprint viewer, which ties to the VNA I just mentioned, seamlessly launches from Epic. It's zero footprint, no install. Anywhere you have Epic, it's a link. You go, zero footprint comes up, shows what you do, and you close it out and you go. So you have to be that frictionless and seamless. That's on the referring physician side. On the diagnostician, on the diagnostic radio side, the world has gone, after pandemic, 70% of radiologists, when I talk to customers that don't do procedures, read remotely. They're not necessarily coming into the office anymore, unless they have residents, that might be different. And so in terms of, you asked about collaboration, one of the things that we've focused on is that the diagnostic stations that are of the new mode of working where it's a distributed workforce, that's really important. That comes to your question on what is an enterprise. An enterprise, when I was practicing, is everyone came to the hospital and we all worked together. Neurology came by. I leaned over to my colleague and said, what do you think of this case? That has exploded out. Mm-hmm. So now you have people that are fractionated everywhere. And so things like dynamic screen sharing of your PACS system to get a second opinion from a colleague, you'd be able to message and have tumor board lists where you drag and drop cases that are going to go to tumor board. All those things that are enabling radiologists to collaborate with either referring physicians or with one another has to now be embedded into the PACS system. As a good friend of ours sometimes say, the C, the communication in PACS is finally, picture archival and communication systems. Most of the people ignored the C for a long time. Mm-hmm. And now the C has come to roost because radiologists are not sitting in the darkroom together in the office, in the hospital or in the clinic. They are everywhere. Mm-hmm. So in in Health Suite Imaging, which we just announced, all that technology for communicating, screen sharing, doing all that stuff is all there. Otherwise, in the modern radiologist enterprise workflow, you're missing things that you used to have when you would just lean in and say, hey, Jared, what do you think of this case? Yeah. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like to also very interesting collaboration at one of our customer sites, Miami Children's Hospital. They're a big Cerner shop. Their PACS is, I forget what their PACS is, it doesn't matter. But their clinical conferences, they have all of these specialists come together for the difficult cases. And the collaboration also needs to include the parents of the babies that they care for, right? So it's not just about physician collaboration, it's also including the patient population and those that can't communicate for themselves, right? And so what I saw there was a level of collaboration that was stunning, right? They have this command center, this beautiful room with huge screens, and they bring in dermatology images, they bring in radiology images, and they all collaborate in the same room with that, but they can also do it virtually. So,
yeah, I'd like to
go ahead.
Add something to add on this subject. So we're talking about your 10 years. During the 10 years, technology changed dramatically, and we got to make sure that all the vendors are prepare for this change, for all this, the solid state disk, the 10 gigabits network and everything, all this, they have to be ready for that new IT infrastructure as well, because as technology change, the vendor should go with the, I would say, the same pace. Otherwise, you can utilize it. And I'm sure with the zero footprint viewer, that's important that all the layers are there to support that. So that's regarding your collaboration with the IT department. I guess they had to catch up with some of the requirement that you had on the IT on the imaging side.
Yeah.
So let's talk infrastructure specifically, right? AWS, Google, Microsoft, Oracle. I mean, we, as a vendor-neutral vendor, right? We have to work with all of them because our customers come to us and they tell us which cloud vendor they want to work with. In the case of UCSD, you've chosen to work with Visage PACS in the cloud, right? So a lot of the questions that we had as the vendor that was supposed to connect your on-prem with cloud workflows was, what kind of latency are we going to introduce in the workflows? We're the routers, we're going to be blamed, right? So we obviously had some trepidation originally, not anymore, right? But your choice to go to the cloud with one of your PACS vendors is pretty fundamental, right? Because it wasn't just, we want to go to the cloud to have an insurance policy for our images, right? It's not just a backup for images. You have live, daily clinical workflows leveraging a large cloud vendor's infrastructure to deliver value. Yep. So how did that decision come about, and how did AWS, in this case, help you alleviate all the latency fears and things like that?
So anybody in the room that's working in a hospital would probably groan at what happened to us, but ultimately we had an RFP that we were running with the whole of the UC. We have 4 other sister hospitals, and we wanted to define a PACS that we were going to move forward with. At the end of that RFP, when all of the 5 sites selected Visage, that is when the idea came up that we should move this to cloud. Everybody had budgeted for on-prem deployment, and at the end, all of a sudden the scope changed. So now we're rushing around talking to the different cloud vendors. Fortunately, we had a relationship with AWS established already, and a handful of other sites did as well, and they met all of the requirements, standing up proofs of concept to validate the function that we had, but we had to cram a lot of learning and a lot of validation in a very short amount of time as we were executing on multiple contracts to start that deployment. In the end, the benefit is that each individual site has deployed differently into AWS. So we have a combined collective of purchasing power in the UC, but San Diego, we have only radiology using Visage in the cloud, and we've deployed it that way. UCLA has a complete SaaS model where Visage owns pretty much the whole deployment. Irvine has incorporated Visage's VNA, so they have even more volume going there than some of the other sites. San Francisco is slightly different, Davis is slightly different. So the benefit ultimately was that we had a product that our radiologists loved. Ultimately, they told us at the beginning, it doesn't matter how hard it is for you to manage it, as long as we love it. And we all understood, and that is how the selection went. And the flexibility that each site had to refine the configuration to that specific site's needs based off of the 50 other applications that we were currently managing, and the current ability to invest in certain technologies that was different across all 5 sites was really amazing. So we have found that once we established all of our connectivity to that cloud, we were able to create redundancy for disaster scenarios, failover scenarios, both at the software and physical layers, and we were able to have great performance. And our radiologists have been very happy because we went from a legacy PACS that used legacy technology to a real up-and-comer using cloud technology, and it has been an amazing success.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, since yesterday, we've seen what large language models can do on AWS, so it's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually had only been at AWS 2 months when this project came up with Visage and UC on AWS, and we were in a bake-off against on-premise and another cloud vendor. And it's still pretty new to AWS, but what really struck out at me is the customer obsession that AWS brought to the specific project. We have leadership principles that drive all of our decision-making, and one of them is about customer obsession. We brought an army of experts in medical imaging that work at AWS, radiologists, former PACS administrators, people who have built PACS, people that run teleradiology, experts in networking and fast image display and disks. And we swarmed this opportunity. And I think in the end, we were completely excited about how fast Visage was running on AWS for the UC system, and it just bring all the expertise together. I think really that has the imaging expertise as well as the cloud expertise at AWS really, I think, made that project extremely successful. And I think it's one thing that a lot of our customers continue to tell us is AWS brings imaging expertise. I can speak IT and clinical to the AWS team. It's not just talking to an IT vendor.
Yeah. Yep. And I can just add that team that came on really enabled the success ultimately because of that compacted time that we had to validate the functionality. Visage had never deployed in AWS before. I think they had a single cloud deployment in the Google Cloud and in the US. And so I was anxious and nervous the whole time, considering how dependent we were on network latency with our legacy PACS system. So we did not go into this happy, but we ended up happy.
So one of the things that we just can't avoid being exposed to at this show, HIMSS, SIM, RBMA, is AI, right? AI is just here and it's here to stay. And it's a fact that most of the AI that's available today was born in the cloud because of the amount of computing power required to train these algorithms. So naturally, these AI companies are available in the cloud natively. The PACS, however, a lot of legacy PACS still live on-prem. And one of the key issues that our customers come to us asking to alleviate or see if we can answer it is how do we reduce the latency that is experienced by having to send images to the cloud, send relevant priors to the cloud, wait for results to come back, and then parse the results to the on-prem PACS or EHR or dictation system, right? Mm-hmm. How do we close this gap? And this is probably a question for AWS. It's inevitable that there's going to be more and more adoption of cloud. It's happening, right? It's not like an if, it's a when and how quickly. So this hybrid model, is it possible? Because not everybody's going to put their PACS in the cloud that quickly, right? We still have a huge amount of legacy technology on-prem, and not all this AI is available on-prem. And so how do we answer this as an industry?
Yeah, I think your point that this is inevitable, it's not an if, it's a when, is kind of the key thing. And one of the key phases we have to go through is this last mile delivery part. And I think just like homes used to have dial-up internet and then slowly moved over to cable modems and fiber optic, health providers, health institutions are gonna, if they haven't already, be installing direct connects and high-speed linkages, and other enabling technologies that really take that last mile problem away. And so these issues around security and latency and speed and resiliency, what happens if the power goes out and so on and so forth, I think we're already at a place where operating in the cloud is on par with what you have on-prem, maybe with a little bit of investment, and I think that investment's going to accelerate as providers see the return on those investments. So if it's going to be more efficient, if they're going to get out of the data center business, if they're going to get to harness AI/ML and get good stuff out of their data that they can't now, it's going to drive more adoption of last mile solutions that make all of that possible.
So you got, part of this is a physics problem. I mean, you have a large payload on your hospital premise, and if the computation, the inference that you're going to do to apply an algorithm to it is in the cloud, physics says you have to get that payload to the cloud. So the problem you're going to face is that you're going to have workflow workarounds until you solve that physics problem. And you're going to either solve it through some magic we don't know about, or your PACS goes to the cloud. So there's only, I think, we have to also sort of, for example, we have AI Manager as a tool that's PACS agnostic. It can sit on-prem, can do exactly what you said, which is grab the payload, send it to the cloud to be able to apply AI, and it doesn't matter what PACS it is. But when I see customers using that, I also recognize that they have a workflow challenge. You just sort of pointed out and you went through it. And I think until more and more migration happens to the cloud, that's going to have to be, you know, if you think of people, process, and platform, you're going to have to buttress that platform problem where you have physics ahead of you. So you're going to put, let's say, AI Manager on-prem. It's going to help you send the payload somewhere else to do the computation, come back, and you're going to buttress that with people and process. My tech is going to do this, he or she is going to do that. So me as a radiologist, I just see it happen. I think we're going to see that. It's the old equivalent to printing the films.
What we see a lot, it's a hybrid solution. So it's going to be a hybrid solution for a while, depending on the either it's radiology, mammography, pathology, or different department. They might choose some of the pieces they can move to the cloud yet, but in reality, it's a hybrid solution until they really sort things out. So in some facility, we see even multiple cloud provider, depending on their needs. And so I think that in healthcare, we see it's slow, it's step by step, it's compound. In fact, it's kind of slow but steady adoption. And like 10 years ago, we didn't see that many cloud providers, cloud installation at all. Now we see more and more and more coming. So that, and we'll see that continue to change.
Yeah, I think the hybrid model is kind of where we're at now, and I think probably your PACS may not be in the cloud quite yet, but you're probably using the cloud in some way, whether it's through image sharing or maybe disaster recovery. As the archive, the main set of images goes to the cloud, you're still going to need back and forth communication. I know many health systems have specialty workstations that are still running Windows 2000, right? They don't have a new OS update for it because either the company has gone out of business or I don't know, but it's absolutely critical to the clinical delivery of the organization. And that just can't be moved to the cloud. We can't run, we won't allow to run an insecure operating system that's not being patched and monitored in AWS. And so that's going to stay there, and that requires technology like the Dicom Systems router to move data back and forth, to make sure that it's available until an application can be rewritten and made cloud native. So yeah, I think we're definitely in a hybrid world specifically for that reason. That may take a while. I think the other thing is we're still bringing up the internet infrastructure. As Shez said, you can't beat physics. There is only so much data that you can move back and forth, and you may not have enough internet capacity yet, or I should say network capacity going to the cloud yet, let alone redundant capacity, because you certainly don't want to be just on one connection and have that go down and be out of business because you don't have connectivity to the internet. So I think that internet infrastructure, that network connectivity is still being built up. And as it gets built up in place, yeah, we can actually move more off-premise and more into the cloud.
Yeah, so actually that comes back to, Scott, your journey is exactly, I think, what, despite where we are and compared to 13 years ago, anyone who's listening in the audience about where the journey towards AI is in this case, it is likely not a hot swap. Your journey was, maybe hopefully it's not 13 years, but it's not like you're all going to go leave and Friday you're doing method A and on Monday when you come to work it's method B, and that somehow everything cloud magically brings AI. And we even convey that to our partners, clinical partners, which is we're in a hybrid world. There's an end state, there's a current state. There are tools you're going to have to apply as you go through the various stages. You need a clinical champion that's going to stay with this project, this program, whatever you want to call it. That's more than just a implementation. It's really going from where you are to, if you are on-prem, for example, not using AI, and you want to be ultimately, the radiologist workspace cockpit that you got everything you need all going. Well, that's not a Monday to Friday to Monday change. That's a strategic plan you put in place that get the building blocks in, and that you get the right partners to come to the table to partner with you, realizing that it's a 2-3 year journey. If hopefully, maybe shorter, but I don't think so. I don't think it is less than a 24-month journey. Yeah. If you're starting from totally on-prem, everything legacy, that's sort of, and that's probably still fast, but can be done. If, to your point, if you bring the right partner, you swarm around it, and you can do it in probably 2 years. But it's not like, let's just come implement everything overnight.
So that example I was talking about earlier, this big hospital system on the East Coast, they've been wanting to, and they've been slowly adopting some AI, mostly cloud-based. And at one point, the clinicians were very excited. They wanted to see it in production. And InfoSec raised a red flag and said, who is this vendor? Who's done the due diligence? Is it a marketplace? How are they going to be actually put into production in my workflows today? Like, even the physicians weren't thinking that way. They just wanted the AI, right? It's the shiny new object that they wanted. But the workflow hadn't been thought through, and the InfoSec side hadn't been thought through. And with so many ransomware attacks still happening today, with hospitals paying ransoms, where does this hybrid model begin to make more sense for hospitals to accelerate their move to the cloud? Because I have no doubt that an AWS team or a GCP or Microsoft would be better at managing security on behalf of their customers. Yet,
or Philips,
the CMIO, or Philips, right?
Well, yeah, I can tell you about a network operating center. No, it's just,
so how do we make that? How do we bridge that gap, right? Because you have a CISO in these hospitals, they have a purpose. There's still things happening on-prem that are vulnerable, and they need us as their vendors to help them through that journey to the cloud, because cybersecurity is still a huge part of that. How do we make sure cybersecurity is not an afterthought anymore? Because it tends to be reactive in most cases. Oh, this new phenomenon, this new virus, this new ransomware attack method. And then you come up with an answer, and then the next one, and then the next one. Cybersecurity should be a part of the fabric, the DNA of a health ecosystem, a health IT ecosystem. So a cloud vendor would be better equipped to put that together for hospitals. So how do we bridge that gap, please? I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think that's an area where moving to the cloud, you get that kind of baked in. So everything we do, and I'm sure it's the same at Philips, security is, even calling it priority zero doesn't do it justice, which is not the way evolutionary organizations like healthcare organizations are able to operate, right? They've been racking and stacking servers and adding ISVs, and new things have evolved that they hadn't anticipated, whereas it's our job to make sure that we're ahead of that curve. But I also think there's two separate categories of security that you're talking about. One is these ransomware, hacker, sort of malware situations. And that's a place where it's actually a bit of a forcing function to modernize your technology stack and move to the cloud, where you have the ability to take snapshots and fire up backup systems and do things on the fly and not be held hostage in a ransomware attack situation or something similar. The other is, if you're using some new AI solution, how do you know that that solution is protecting patient identity and has the right encryption built in and is at the right level of standards and rigor that we've all come to expect through our healthcare data chain? And there's probably a regulatory role there, but I think all of us also have a responsibility to keep the bar high on that. We know what good looks like. We know what the standard should be. Most people operate that way because nobody wants the risk exposure. but there have to be ways of validating that and giving a seal of approval that everybody recognizes. Otherwise, every hospital is left to figure this out for itself, and that's not really very efficient.
I think that's exactly right. And the way we look at it at Philips is it's a shared responsibility. So if you look at it, you have, for example, our stack is also built on AWS. You have AWS underneath. There's a responsibility for AWS in managing what they need to do. We have our health suite imaging, which is, we have our own network operations center, 24/7, follow the sun, managing the cybersecurity around that layer. And at the end of the day, the scanner, the CT scanner is sitting on-prem. And there's a CISO that has a responsibility to protect that network as well. So you got the hospital network, you got the Philips infrastructure, you got the cloud provider beneath it. Security is going to have to be a shared responsibility. It's not like any one of these teams can say, I will take full responsibility for cyber. Because then, what if the hospital network has breaches? What if I won't even say the other ones. But yeah, so that I really do think is a shared responsibility. The idea that any one organization just comes in and waves a wand and says, I gotcha. Mm-hmm. It's, I think, a fool's journey.
I think IT department realized that on cloud solution, it's as secure as prem, even better. The reason is, like, no matter what, it's shared responsibility. IT department, there is no difference what cloud and where you still need to manage it. So if they don't go on the cloud and don't configure firewall correctly, the password,
exactly.
all this, nobody's gonna do that for them. Nobody. It doesn't matter if they do it, if they make the same mistake on-prem, on the cloud, they're gonna face the same issue. So this is definitely still shared responsibility, and there is certain things that obviously way better enforced on clouds that there is no one to enforce it on-prem for the customer. So that's given, and that's the advantage, actually.
Actually, you said one other thing. I'd love Scott's opinion on this, because you said the word workflow. This is an area, actually, I'm just me, Shez speaking, I'm actually worried about. Here's why. Radiology has been on PACS for a long time. The features between the PACS, radiologists has developed a mindset of how PACS is being used. Mm-hmm. And with the introduction of AI, the workflow is going to change. And we talked about it being potentially hybrid that takes 2 years, where you can experiment, you're going to try new things with a partner. So physicians, radiologists that have been accustomed to a particular workflow, because we're the early adopters, right? I mean, as you pointed out. So have you managed the fact that when I deployed EMRs, there was turbulence in the workflow because they're going from paper to digital.
Yep.
But the radiologists have got their ways.
Yep.
And now you introduce workflows that are likely significantly different because of AI. I'm curious, how did your radiologists how did you take them through that journey? Because I'm seeing signals in the field that there's friction as radiologists tell the IT folks, I just want the AI to be magically there, but I do everything I used to do yesterday. Mm-hmm. But that's really not possible.
So it is, I'll tell you, it's better. I started my career 20 years ago training doctors how to go from a dictaphone to speech recognition, and they hated it. That was the hardest years of my life, telling a doctor they were now going to be the transcriptionist, basically. And so that transition, I think, at least for radiologists, let them know that now I'm all technology. My scalpel is on this computer and only on this computer. And so as newer tools became available, we at UCSD have an amazing group of radiologists, and they would come to RSNA, and 20 different radiologists would talk to 20 different AI vendors, and we took all of them. And there was a great deal of redundancy, and there was a lack of continuity where you would have to log into a website or a special thing, and that nothing was integrated. So I think over the last 6 to 7 years, as AI has matured and the vendors who are really kind of driving that are gaining more market share, they have invested smartly into better integrations. All of the things that you're probably building into your product, auto logins, little widgets that pop up with notifications if a new finding potentially has been found, the ability to communicate within that architecture with other radiologists or referring physicians or care teams. And the ones who have built that into their product are, the uptake has been really quick. The ones that don't, all we hear is, can you get this vendor to do what that vendor does? And so we put in those enhancement requests. I think that the biggest change in the workflow is it comes back down to speed and physics. Because if a radiologist has a huge queue to work through and the turnaround time isn't fast in getting that additional feedback from the AI tool to them in a quick enough manner where they're at that patient and they have to wait X more minutes before it comes, they're going to move on. Now you've interrupted some flow, and it's going to cause an impact. And so I think that's the final thing that we've fortunately been able to successfully see the AI vendors doing is, it's the first question we ask, how quick's the turnaround? Because we know our doctors are going to be clicking on that next patient to start reading out, and they need it there quickly. And cloud has not fallen down as the primary delivery or management method of those databases and algorithms. And it's been fortunately better than transitioning to speech recognition.
Terrific.
So, time check, we should be starting our Q&A within a couple of minutes, but I do have a question that is more financial in nature. I don't know if you, Chris, you're probably the right person to ask about that. When our customers come to us and say, we want to put one of your VNAs in a cloud, where should we go? And they cannot articulate for themselves, even with a spreadsheet, what their actual exposure to cost is going to be in the long run. It's really hard to do. I mean, you've tried, right? It's an exercise in futility almost, because you can't figure out how much it costs to keep it there, for how long, egress costs. What's the story? How do we answer our customers when they come to us about where they're better off because it's going to be cheaper in the end run, right? What is that inflection point at which they have to decide it's better to stay in the cloud or go back to on-prem because cloud is going to be more expensive, right? We don't know the answer. Can you help us with that?
Sure. Yeah, I think the cloud pay-as-you-go consumption model is a new paradigm, especially at the granularity that the cloud will charge you. It's getting down to bytes being egressed here and how many CPU cycles are there. A year ago, I think I didn't really have a good answer. How much would it cost me to put my PACS in there? Because very few people had just begun to move their PACS in the cloud. But today, we now have over, I think, 20 different hospital systems which have fully migrated PACS into the cloud, like UCSD. And we can look at their bills and we know, right? Now, this is actually and it's going to vary depending upon the PACS vendor, because each PACS vendor will have different architecture. Some will be server-side rendering, some will be client, some will be hybrid. Some are still using SQL Server running on AWS, right? And others will use our native databases. And so, the costs vary, but they are. I think we can look at. We have many examples to draw against now to say this is what we're seeing in a facility that is similar to yours with this specific PACS vendor. I think so. The PACS vendors that are bringing new solutions, cloud-based solutions onto the market, may not look exactly like the other ones we put out yet. They might be cheaper, might be more expensive, we don't know. But I think what we can say about the cloud is that what we're seeing consistently is as different PACS and VNAs are optimizing their systems for the cloud, they're consistently seeing lower costs, higher availability, and faster performance. And so I think we're still looking across the industry, and we're it's a spectrum, right? We have PACS vendors that are different spots on the spectrum in terms of being fully cloud native versus just being what we call lift and shift. Those that more cloud native will be far more, like I said, performant, cost effective, and available. And that's just, I think the whole market's going to continue to shift more towards cloud native, so we'll see that improve over time. But yes, we can forecast what those costs are now, given the number of successes we've had.
You can update your data. You said you have 20 hospitals. We have 80 PACS sites on AWS, so you definitely have more than 20.
Excellent. There we go.
I mean, we're probably your largest PACS on the cloud is probably Philips. I mean, we have customers obviously that are in there, but you've got a lot.
And can you forecast the price now with that number of references?
I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I mean, it should be coming from the cloud vendor, right? Here's a calculator that can help you at least within 5 or 10, points, error rate. Let us know what is our 5-year cost, 10-year cost of operating this in your infrastructure, right? It's that kind of calculator would be really, really useful. I think there is one available. I just can't work it for some reason. I need some help. Can you see?
AWS has very huge Excel spreadsheets to calculate your costs, but in some cases with a system that's a complex system like an enterprise PACS or VNA, there's so many moving pieces. It's almost better to see it, to do it and then measure it, and then now you know where you're at.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for your contributions to this conversation. I think I'd like our audience to have an opportunity to ask us questions. So we have one gentleman ready to ask a question right away.
Hey, just wanted to jump in on the last theme because this was thinking all along, Florent posed it. A lot of the clients and folks we work with, and don't get me wrong, right? I wish I could take a shotgun to every Blade server and every data center, right? Standing up imaging IT, but I think the real mid-sized community hospital, they have no idea to get to that ROI because there's such opaque pricing transparency. And the running joke kind of on the ground is, well, no, UC is UC. So, they have the purchasing power to pay for the premium PACS, and to get the hordes of AWS folks to come down. And so again, what I have seen is also there's also not a willingness, it seems, from the tech 3.5 cloud vendors to do any kind of price negotiation. It's like, we can maybe tell you that pricing, but that's what it is forever and ever. And maybe next year we're not going to care that much about healthcare, right? Where there's going to be a change coming around, right? So I feel like the cloud vendors need to help us, to help ourselves, to help our clients, to say, let's find a simple way. And granted, I understand it's complex. We got the physics problems and all that, right? But I see the biggest resistance on the ground with the real CIO and the CMIO, a rad practice is like, this is going to cost us more money. And yeah, there's going to be some speed, uptime stuff, right? But why should we go through this if we can keep running where we are? And we need help to get through the first 10 steps because we don't have analysts, we don't have UC staff sitting around, right? And again, it's very spotty too, depending on the PACS, and they're negotiated with what they did with their cloud vendor. So I think the sooner we can get to this simple kind of idea and I guess that's the plea kind of, I know, Chris, you guys, because you have that expertise in doing that, right? But it feels like on the ground, the commercial piece is where it kind of goes to stop, right?
I think you raised a really good point, and I just want to put there's an interesting point you might want to diverge on and think about this, which is, for example, Philips, our PACS is a fee per study, and when we went to the cloud, the fee per study stayed the fee per study. You're actually shielded from their cost. And so I think it depends, when you think of where you are, if you're thinking, there are different ways of looking at what ultimately your PACS provider, when you say your PACS provider, you're actually talking to me, not to these guys. Because these guys are beneath, I'm managing them. The cost calculator is actually my problem. Because to you, I've given you a very commercial commitment. I've said it's fee per study and it's X dollars per study piece. It's on-prem or on cloud, you pick. Currently, we say you pick. In the fullness of time, we're not going to say you pick. We're going to say it's just cloud. So we've actually removed the commercial burden from organizations that said, risk's on me. Because of that difficulty. Of course, and then I operate at scale. I operate at scale, so I partner with a cloud provider, we operate at scale, and so from a commercial go-to-market, if you're working with Philips, the price, we didn't say, look, we'll calculate AWS's fee and we'll figure out what we're going to charge you. It's a fee per study. Good to go.
Yeah, and I think actually, there's different size customers. There's very small and very, very, very large. And I think cloud works with all of those, but in different ways. I actually think the smaller and medium-sized health systems, hospitals have a lot more benefits of going to a cloud SaaS model than they would keeping it on premise, because now they're not managing the infrastructure, right? AWS is managing that infrastructure, and they're not even managing this patching and upgrading of software. A SaaS vendor would be doing that for you. And the cost is much more known. I think where the cost complexity gets in, if you are a very large organization and you're already in AWS and using all of our services, and you want to take a PACS system and deploy it in your account.
Lift and shift.
Lift and shift. That can get a little bit more complex, but the low and medium size really can gain a lot from a cloud SaaS solution.
And I also think we've not traditionally thought about things in terms of total cost of ownership, really, right? Like heating, cooling, staffing, off hours service, hardware refresh cycles. And I can tell you on a unit economic basis, and these are complicated systems and there's a lot of devil in the details, but the cloud keeps getting cheaper. To store data, to procure compute, which are really the two main pieces of what you're paying for, the price just keeps dropping, and you don't have to keep re-upping every few years. You just move your stuff and you reap the benefits on a continually operating basis. So it is an apples and oranges comparison, and I think we've got work to do to make the story a little more digestible. But I think to Shez's and Chris's point, the SaaS model sort of is the perfect place to land, which is, what are you going to pay per study? And I remember when PACS came, when I was just a young radiologist and we got our first workstation, they said, look, whatever you're paying for film, just pay us and we'll do PACS. And that was it.
Yes, sir.
I actually had a question about something you had said earlier about there being a shared responsibility for security, and which makes a lot of sense because there isn't someone that can be universally in charge of both of those things. But I'm just wondering how that shared responsibility, is that story acceptable to regulators? And is that story also acceptable to your patients? Do they have to get disclosed? Is there a disclosure requirement that they have to agree to say, and I understand I can't just yell at the hospital if something goes wrong and my data is stolen. Now I have to go to AWS or Philips and also be concerned with that in a class action or something like that. I'm just curious if that's really been thought about yet, and if it has, what the answer is.
Yeah, I can share with you what I think is the practical way that it plays out, since you asked a practical question, and then I can maybe opine a bit more philosophically. So the practical really is that I suspect patients would hold their health system accountable, and the health systems have back-to-back agreements that hold their suppliers accountable. So the practicality is it's probably a cascading responsibility from a consumer's lens, from a consumer patient lens. Hospital X, you have a problem, I'm coming after you, and then there's back-to-back agreements, which if it gets that ugly, that's where they agree. And that's practically what happens. So we have agreements with hospitals. They have an implied agreement with patients, and then we have an agreement implied with our providers, and so this daisy chains. And then, so that's sort of point one. I think you asked about regulators. I think the way, so PACS is a medical device, and so there's a quality management system. You comply with the way it's built, the way you comply with the standards that you need to put, but also as an organization, in our network operations center, there are NIST standards for security that we comply with, ISO standards we comply with. So we check all the check boxes where there are standards to be said that this is a good seal of practice. So, and that we do not necessarily, being candid, we do it because also if should something, for protection, the right thing to do, security, quality, regulatory, but also at the end of the day, if something untoward happens, people want to know that you had done the right check boxes. So regulatory-wise, we check the check boxes. practically, I think consumers come to the front door of the health system, which then has back-to-back agreements with the suppliers?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question because, well, as a vendor, we do everything we can to provide security. We pick the right operating system, we harden it. It's a huge checklist. But at the end of the day, the binary answer, it's a healthcare provider.
Yep.
No matter, that's where patient will come. And it's their responsibility on the end to check what vendor they choose and cloud they choose, right?
It really is. There's a lot of investment at every hospital that goes into the information security group. And the better they are, the more thorough they review every single piece of technology that touches the network within the hospital, within their realm of responsibility. And then we also have these BAAs that tie that back to every vendor that we sign a contract with. And I'm not sure that we've ever gone after fortunately we haven't had any significant breaches, knock on wood for me, but we have helped our regional competitors as they've been attacked. We've had the opportunity to engage with them to support them through being able to continue taking care of their patients when they couldn't. And it is typically, unfortunately, due to the typical type of exposure that you just sometimes can't plan for. Someone gives away their password and they have admin credentials of something, and no amount of investment in CyberArk and whatever else you're putting in the layers is gonna keep that from being a problem. And so really, I think what we end up doing is just making sure that we've done that analysis up front, that any findings that come from our information security team, we actually document everything that we need to do during our configuration of a particular application. And then there's going to be exceptions, and we have to document those exceptions, so if something does happen, we have that reference point and know where to look. So it is 100% a partnership with InfoSec. It's everybody's worst nightmare because it's going to add months to your project on the front end, but it is now no different than your mom telling you to brush your teeth before you go to school. You just got to do it.
Well, we've reached the end of our session. Can't tell you how grateful I am for all of you being here and participating in this discussion. If there are any follow-up questions for any of our panelists, we'd be happy to gather them via email and communicate that way. So thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of RSNA. Travel safe wherever you may be going.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.